Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I make a blazer for a male doll. Now this doll is a resident of the rooming house Dollhouse. His name is Uncle Benny, and I started by making the sleeves to his blazer. Almost any time I'm making a shirt or a jacket, I always start with the sleeves and more or less just create like a tube shaped piece of fabric where I create a seam. And after I've created the seam, I kind of shape off the top part of the sleeve to make it where it'll contour more to the shoulder of the doll. Now, after I'm sure that the seam that I've created is dry, I turn the sleeve right side out. Now, if you make the seam too big, you may need to trim it at this point before you turn it right side out. Now here you see me just using my needle tool to help me get it out. Always be careful. You don't want to puncture your fabric. It just helps you get it through to the other side. Now here's the second sleeve, and I did the exact same thing. Now that I have both of my sleeves turned right side out, I did use my clover iron to just smooth them out a little bit. This fabric is 100% cotton, and it's a little bit thin, so it did have quite a few wrinkles in it, but I want everything to look nice and smooth and neat when I begin to add it to my doll. Now these clothes are not removable. They're going to be glued directly to the doll. So here I am trying on the first sleeve, put it in Uncle Benny. Now notice that he already has on a shirt. He has on a blue dress shirt. So this blazer is going on top of the shirt. Now you can make a blazer where you would cover the body completely, but I'll cover that topic in another video. Now I see that the sleeve is fitting nicely on top of the dress shirt, but I did make the sleeve a little bit long. Dolls, no worries on that. I just pulled the sleeve off, and after I pulled it off, I opened up a little bit of the seam and put it up higher on his arm. So now the wrist part is exposed, and I'll just need to trim off a little bit at the top. So never worry if things are a little bit long. I'd rather it be too long than too short, and you can trim it. When it's too short, you really can't fix it. But I take that back. Actually, if it was too short, there's a remedy for that too, but I'll cover that in another video. So let's stay on course. So I went on to the second sleeve. I realized I made it a little bit small, so I did have to add additional glue to narrow the sleeve opening, and I'm going to allow that to dry while I work on the body of the blazer. Now in this instance, I had the back of the blazer, and then I added the two pieces to the top. Now I'm still making that smock-like shape that I actually used the same technique when I made Pop's shirt in the previous video. And I added glue to the side seams of both sides of the fabric. And make sure you're gluing the right side edges so that you will have the garment right side out when the glue dries. Now I am using my clover iron to tap those edges or seams to help encourage the glue to dry. So while the seams of the body of the jacket are drying, I went on and fitted the other sleeve on. Now I do need to trim that part up near his shoulder because you can see it's a little bit bunchy. Now the bodice of the blazer is dry, the seam parts, just wanted to point out those edges where I actually have already done my snips and glued down those parts that are going to go around the shoulder and under the arm. So it's all ready to be glued together to the shoulder area of the sleeves of the blazer. Now I want you to pay close attention to how I fit this around his shoulders. Now I've already done the snips and folded back those edges, so they're all ready to go. But I'm making sure everything lays nice and neat before I do any gluing. Now I do want to finish off this part of the jacket where it's going to close so it'll look nice and neat when I begin to fold it down and do the detailing. So you can see there's a very thin hem at the bottom. You see the seams, and again I'm hemming the other side so that the jacket will close really neatly when I am done with my assembly. Now, after I closed the opening seam down the front of the jacket, I did trim down some of that seam on the inside, again, because I don't want it to look bulky inside Uncle Benny's jacket or blazer. So let's go ahead and get this jacket assembled so I can do the detailing, which is my favorite part. Now, after I've got it fitted on him on both sides, I'm just making sure everything lays nice and neat so it'll close nicely. One side I'm trying to overlap to the other side. Now you can do double-breasted jackets, dolls. You can do single-breasted jackets. It's all up to you. I'm just showing you the techniques I use to get the results I get, and you can modify them any number of ways to suit your doll's outfit. So I've added the glue to the part that lays around the shoulder area and gently laid it where I want it to hit on his shoulder and his arm area. Now you want to decide that before you lay it down, because once the glue is on there, you can't go back. So now that it's positioned nicely on the front, I know exactly where I want it to come up in the back. And the same way, I'm just checking it before I add the glue. And here I add the little glue to that curved area. Now, dolls, after you get it in place, you want to allow it a few seconds to set up and to dry before you start to work on that shoulder. So while I'm allowing that part to dry, I went on over to the other side. Now on that side, I still had quite a bit to trim off because I didn't trim off the excess on that sleeve. So that's what I'm doing in that frame, getting that sleeve together before I add the body of my jacket. But I did the same thing, dolls, added it to the inside curve, and I pressed it firmly in place where I wanted it to sit on his shoulder. When I was done with the front, I allowed it to dry, and I turned it on the back and did the exact same technique. I trimmed off that extra and added glue to that curved finished area, and then I pressed it firmly on his back. Now that all the shoulder areas are in place, I can do a little bit more customizing and tailoring to the jacket. Now you see it's too bunchy in the back, so I just split it up the back really neatly all the way up to the neckline, and then I folded it over. Now I do want to add sort of like a hem on this one side, just so that it'll look, like I said, like a finished garment. So after I added the tacky glue to that little edge, I just gently folded it over and creased it really neatly. And after I creased it, I folded down on his back. Now I am going to leave a little bit open at the bottom to kind of give like a kick pleat, which most men's jackets have. So I just added my tacky glue and folded it down. Now that's given the shoulders enough time to set up, so I'm going to trim those off so we can start working on this collar portion. So I just trimmed it off in the front because I'm going to give him a really cool collar. I do have an idea as far as how to kind of style this up and make it look a little bit more like a long vintage riding jacket. So I'm just kind of holding him on his side so you can see what I do with these shoulders. Again, I did the shoulders just like I did the men's shirt in the previous video to this series. If you haven't seen that video, I will leave a link in the description. But here I'm just adding glue and folding it down and tucking it over to give him a nice strong shoulder line. And I went to the other side and did the exact same thing. After I did the second side, I just pressed it down really good to make sure that both of the shoulders were nice and strong and neat so that it really looked like a finished jacket. And you can see there his little kick pleat in the back. I really like the way the sleeve length is, that you can see the dress shirt peeking out a little bit, but not a lot. I do realize I do need to add a collar to the blue shirt because I didn't put a collar on it when I completed it. Now, dolls, while I was looking at his blazer and looking at the colors and his slacks, I felt like it needed a little bit of color to kind of brighten it up. And I have this thin piece of leather scrap that was given to me. And I decided to cut some little pieces off of it to make him a really cool collar. And I think that'll really make it to stand out and look a little bit more interesting and really fit his character a little bit more. So to make the collar out of this leather, dolls, I just cut some really skinny, really long triangles and laid them on top of the jacket to see where they would lay. Now, they may not look like much right now, but when I place them the way I want them on the jacket, they're going to look like leather lapels. Now, dolls, I must admit I did have to play with this a little while to get the angles straight. And after I was satisfied with the angles for the lapels, I cut out a third piece to be my actual collar. And I had to make sure they laid right around his neck so that they would match up with the actual lapels. And I was, after quite a bit of playing to play with those angles, I was comfortable with what I wanted to do with the little pieces. I went ahead and made him a quick collar for the blue shirt that's under the blazer, so that'll look nice and neat. Because keep in mind, dolls, we're not just doing the blazer is really making the entire outfit. And to be honest, dolls, I'm actually making the blazer because I didn't particularly like the way the blue shirt turned out. So I really just wanted to cover it up. But it ended up working really well as an underpiece to give a little character and distinction to his outfit. Now, after I finished making the little collar, I actually put the glue on and glued it. And now I'm closing his jacket up to see how it will look. And now it's time for me to add the little leather lapels and collar to finish off his jacket. Now, dolls, you see me here just adding the tacky glue to the leather pieces that I cut out for around the neck or the back of the collar for this particular blazer. Now, I did kind of put it a little bit high, so I will need to pull it, but I have to pull it gently so that I don't smear the glue. Because in an instance like this, that would be pretty much a disaster at this point. Now, I'm really proud of how this is turning out. I'm really proud of how Uncle Benny is looking. Now, Uncle Benny was one of my original Dollhouse dolls that I made back in 2004. He was one of the first ones I ever made out of polymer clay. So I'm particularly proud of him and really proud that his outfit that I made for him today is much better than the one I made him originally back in 2004. Now that the collar is on secure, we're going to go ahead and add these lapels. Now, based on where I want to place the lapels, the front of the jacket is a little bit wide, but no problems on that, dolls. I'm going to fold it under, which will create a heavier or more hardy base for the part that I'm adding the leather pieces to. So you'll see what I mean in a moment. Now, I don't know if you dolls noticed or not, but this piece of fabric that I used to make his jacket out of isn't very heavy, but because of the dark undershirt, it looks opaque. It doesn't look see-through. Now here I am adding that little lapel piece and matching it up to the collar, and I'm going to add my glue. Now, dolls, I really slowed the video down for this portion. I kind of speed through parts that I thought might be a little bit boring, but I'm slowing this down because I really want you to see how I do this. So I'm placing it on top of the fabric where I want it to go. And I was very sparing with the amount that I put on there, but that little piece that's sticking out, I'm going to clean the glue off of it, and then I'm going to fold that little edge back under the leather part after it sets up. So I'm going to give it a couple seconds. I'm not going to cut it or trim it off. I'm actually going to fold it under there so that it'll give it a more sturdy base. Now I also want you to take note that I made this lapel a little bit longer and wider just to give the impression that this would be the one that's laid over the top of the other one. And here I am adding the glue for that second lapel and gently placing it up against the collar and along the opening of the blazer. Now, if you can see how they laid, I did have to add a little extra glue at the top of that portion. And now you can see me here folding a little piece back to reinforce the part behind the leather. I didn't trim it off, I just folded it over. And I think that's a better option than trimming the fabric away. I think it provides a more substantial base or a thicker platform for the leather to rest on. So I think that looks very nice and very neat. It's folded over really nicely to give his suit a really finished, completed look. It looks very stylish. I think Uncle Benny looks very distinguished in his new riding jacket. So let's go ahead and get his pockets on and his tie and buttons together so he back to the rooming house. Now, just so you know, I did fold down both sides. I actually waited till the leather part was pretty dry and firm before I began to manipulate that piece under there. But I did the exact same thing on the other lapel. So now that his collar and lapels are complete on the jacket, I just wanted to give the illusion that his jacket had pockets. And no, dolls, I'm not going to actually make pockets. We're not doing any holes at all. I just want to cut little pieces of leather and place them where I think pockets should be. Now here I'm just adjusting the jacket just to determine where I want to place those buttons. And you see how everything closes nice and neatly. So let's figure out where we're going to put his pocket. So I cut a few small pieces of the leather. I didn't do any serious measuring dials. I just cut some little pieces, some little snips off of the leather. And be advised, if you don't do some serious measuring, you will have to do a little bit to trim it up and make sure it's even. But after you got a nice little piece, you just find the place that you want to place it. Now, dolls, in every circumstance, whether I'm doing doll clothes or furniture, I always do my dry fit, tri fit, and I just placed everything where I thought I wanted it to be before I came back and added my actual glue. And after I was comfortable with the placement, I carefully added my tacky glue to the actual jacket and then laid the little pieces of leather right on top of the glue. I pressed it down to make sure it was secure and allowed it to dry. Now, I probably shouldn't be handling Uncle Benny this much because his pockets are still wet, but I'm just so proud of the way his outfit looks. Everything looks orderly. I'm just getting a little lint off of him. Got his little kick pleat in the back. I think he looks great. And you see here, I didn't show it, but I did add him a little red tie. So here I am adding my little nail art studs as buttons. I flipped them on the back. I actually stuck the sparkly part into the glue and just allowed the back of the button to show, and that worked out well for a men's button. Now, dolls, if you like the way Uncle Benny's blazer turned out, definitely let me know in the comments. Now, I do have a few more techniques I want to share with you about dressing men dollhouse dolls. So make sure you stay tuned, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye bye now, dolls.